most times we need to save data on our devices. Now, as we play with our applications, we create our applications, most of the data is data that is not safe beyond a session, right, of the application. So it's data that while the application is working, while we're building the application, while we're using the application, the data is manipulated in such a way that we can actually see results and so forth. But there are times when we want to save, persist the data, as we call it in development, on our devices so that we can re-invoke that data at a later time, even way after the user has played and got off the application and comes back. So we have an internal file system, all devices do, where data can be saved, internal data. So in this case, we could take all the data that we have saved internally and then populate it into our application. Now, the beauty here again is that if we save the data on device, this data can be re-invoked at a later time, as I explained earlier, which is wonderful because then once the user is done playing with the application, the user gets off the app, they can always go back. In the next session that they open the app, they were able to see the data that has been saved on file. And lucky for us, all devices have the capability of saving pieces of data for later use. There are different ways in which we can save data on devices. It all depends on what is it that we're working on. The most primitive way, I would say, is we could save data into text files, right? Now, the text files will literally be a .txt or any form of saving data that is primitive, so not very sophisticated, if you will. But nevertheless, very important. So you can save into text file and then re-invoke those text files and reread them once you've saved them at a later time in your applications. If we move up a little bit, there is what we call the shared preferences. We'll talk about this, but shared preferences is another way of us saving data in our applications, iOS and Android. Although in iOS they have a different name, but it's all the same way. Now, shared preferences is a class or a mechanism of saving data into key value pairs. And we've talked about key value pairs data structures such as maps and dictionaries and so forth. Ultimately, we would want to have something more structured, so that we can actually save our data into tables, and then we have some sort of relational dependency between those tables and the items or data saved in those tables. For that, we need what we call a database. Database in this case would be the most sophisticated way for us to save data on any device, because now we have those relational dependencies between tables and so forth. And as we go down this list from text file to shared preferences and database, there's also what we call the efficiency in how we save and retrieve data. So obviously, once you have a relational database where tables are related via keys and so forth, then there is a faster way of retrieving those data and also a faster way of writing the data to the database table. Okay, so if we have a larger amount of data that we want to make sure that is well organized for faster retrieval and writing into the database, into the tables, then of course a database is the best way to go. But if you have smaller pieces of data, text files and shared preferences are most commonly used. All right, so in the next videos we're going to go through the process of creating shared preferences, and of course ultimately we'll do the database. Okay, very exciting. Perfect. I'll see you next.